to simplify the program. What are we trying to prevent against here? 80% of the time, the breaches that we've heard about were all preventable, but we had to simplify what was happening with the third party systems that we were bringing into our companies and how they were being set up and how they were being managed and maintained. Three, communicate. There needs to be a constant communication between the cybersecurity team or office and the rest of the company and the customers and the board. Figure out what that cadence is. You can't just disappear and go back into your SOC with all of your screens and all of your alerts and emerge when there's a problem. We call those people chicken littles, right? You have got to have a constant presence where you are educating people on how to do their part, because every single one of us is a frontline to protect our companies and ourselves. And make sure that you're staying top of mind, because cybersecurity to me is the most important thing that any of us have to work on right now in the world, because so much of our critical infrastructure is dependent on cybersecurity and vulnerabilities. So it's a tough job for a CISO. And years ago, I think, the CISO was the highest ranking technical person that came out of IT or product security. And today we demand a lot of our CISOs. They have to be both externally facing and internally facing.
They have to be, I mean, they're wearing so many different hats too, and they have to be able to understand something at a very technical level and then take, this like word salad that he just got thrown from an engineer that lives in the code and translate that somehow to people that know how to log into their email. And that's like it.
It's several layers of translation. If have you ever experienced a breach? I'm sure you have.
I haven't. I've been close.
Okay. When you experience a breach, you spend months going through the anatomy of that breach. And there are lots of different people who have a part of that. You've got developers, you have IT, you have maybe the person who did something who had no idea what they touched, and each of them have a role in explaining sort of the anatomy of it. Every single person there has to be translated into some common language. What a developer explains is happening in the system they created, and the impact that a cybersecurity expert explains is the same thing using totally different language.
Yeah, it's interesting. I worked for a credit bureau earlier on in my career, and literally, I think it was just weeks before I started what was it, the Equifax breach happened. And my manager had told me that when that happened, essentially everyone went to the bar, the entire security team from CISO down, and the CISO said, what do you need to happen? Right. And the managers and the directors, they all said, like, look, we're presenting you all of these tools and we're getting no budget. We need money. And I guess he called the CEO right there at the bar. And the CEO said, all right, sign whatever deals you need to. You have a blank check. And literally within 7 days, we now had a tech stack that we needed, right? And the team that I eventually came to lead just like 2 or 3 weeks later went from one person to 12 people in 6 months, which in security, that is pretty much unheard of. It's completely unheard of. You know how long that takes to find one person, let alone 12?
Yeah.
Which, it takes a catastrophic event like that to happen because it materializes, the situation to everyone very easily, right? Like you don't have to translate any more of this technical stuff. It's like, hey, you see what happened over there? Well, we have those same holes. Like we have those same issues, like it could have been us, and if it was us, probably wouldn't have survived it.
And, no company is going to be able to outspend a bad actor to prevent an attack. It has to be about your ability to be resilient. And your ability to be resilient is also not exclusively dependent on the money that you put into your cybersecurity program. It's also largely dependent on whether or not your workforce is educated, whether or not you simulated an emergency response, and whether or not you have a business continuity plan to make sure that your critical infrastructure to keep your business up and running has sort of a spare tire while you're figuring out what happened.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Now I'm on the professional services side of security, which is fantastic. I love it. Like this is where I should have been like 5 years ago, right? But when I was on the internal side at a very large company, we were doing a like a tabletop exercise, right? So we have lawyers on the call, and Like every technical lead in the org is on the call, and there's this hypothetical scenario that AWS is playing out for us. And my CISO, I report directly to the CISO, and he said, I know you're gonna want to jump in. Hold yourself back and let them bring it to us, because the flow is that they're supposed to be able to identify it. We don't have that budget actually to enable us to identify it. So they have to do their job, and then they have to alert us. And so I waited. It was like 3 hours. It was 3 hours into this exercise, technically week two, right? Into this hypothetical scenario. And these people are going in circles, not making any progress. Right. And I guess maybe the blessing and the curse of a security person is that you actually know how to do everyone else's technical job, like database admin, system admin, all that stuff. Like, you know it inside and out, but you can't do it and you shouldn't do it, because it's their job for a reason. And I just cut them off and I said, hey guys, you do understand we're at day 15 and security has not been told that we've been breached. You understand that, because like security is actually the route to get to the lawyers. You guys have to go to us. We determine if it's real, and then we engage the lawyers. And the lawyer he wasn't even saying anything on the call, right? Which it was interesting for sure. And they like all paused, like, we didn't even know that that was like in our process. Now, fast forward to me doing professional services, in security, you're always thinking of, well, if this happens, what's next? If this happens, what do I do? Right. And every good security person starts out in help desk in some way. And the first thing that you learn in help desk is you have to document everything, because when you have an angry customer calling you, they're yelling at you, they're paying for a service, and maybe it's your fault, maybe it's not, right? But something didn't work. And you have to, under stress, maybe it's, not that high of stress, but it's still stress. Under stress, you have to figure out what commands to run and everything like that, right? So you document everything so that under that stressful environment, all you have to do is follow step one, then two, then three, whatever it might be, right? And so now from the professional services side, I get to customers and we're going through different scenarios. Like literally earlier today, they were 100% into one availability zone in the cloud. I said, hey guys, like, what happens if AWS has another outage like they tend to always do every 2 years? They said, oh, we're just, we kind of deal with it. We're hard down. I said, well, what if that doesn't come back up, and you have to like migrate stuff over? Do you have a plan for that? And they said, no, that's a big problem then,
You know, when you were talking about tabletop exercises, I think every single tabletop exercise I've done for the last 15 years, when you do them with an executive and sometimes you invite a board of directors in, almost every single one has caved and paid the ransom in the tabletop exercise. Just a table, right? For those of you who know the tabletop exercise is listening, it's a simulated emergency, so it's not real. But they're so exhausted by the ends of this process